We're in Colstrip, Montana, and we're pleased to be talking with Senator Duane Ankney, who represents this area in this part of Montana. Welcome, and pleased to have you. Senator, could we begin by telling us a little about your background and especially your political background? How did you get involved in politics, and what has been your involvement?
Well, I got involved somewhat with politics about 1985 in working to try to get the severance tax lowered. We was looking at losing some contracts with Minnesota Power and Light and some of those upper Midwest utilities because of the cost of our coal. And I guess that was my first step into politics. We was a grassroots movement. We couldn't have any company sponsors because of our 501(c) status. We was just a bunch of miners, and very successful in our endeavors. We managed to get the severance tax lowered. We hung on to those contracts for probably another, at least another decade. Governor Schwinden had us over to the armory and met with us all. And he was very nice to everybody and listened to what they had to say. And you know, I remember one lady, she was pregnant. Mrs. Brown is her name. She was a school teacher here. And that baby is off to college, you know. So it's been a while, but that's when I got started. And then I worked at the mine, and I was a processing superintendent and didn't have much time. I kind of kept up on what was going on, but I could see that coal mining and the impression that a lot of people had of how we treated the land and stuff was beginning to be a problem. I mean, and working in it, I could see that our reclamation efforts were first class. I mean, we was doing it the way it should be done, but I took a look around, you know. I raised a family here. Good job. I mean, my kids wanted to go to college. Every one of my kids had an opportunity to go to college, whether they walked in the front door and out the back door. They had the opportunity. So I wanted to try to do everything I could to save those jobs. And then when I got into that, it became more and more apparent of what an impact this operation here in Colstrip has on the state budget. I mean, we contribute hundreds of millions of dollars annually to the state budget. And so that kind of became my cross to bear, was Colstrip and the power plant, and trying to keep it operating and keep that flow of money going into the coffers in Helena, into the coffers in the county, and keeping these young people in Montana working. I mean, a worker over here at the plant, the average, he'll make anywhere between 85 and 120,000 a year.
Is that right?
Now, you can provide for your family pretty good on that. And we even they managed to make enough money to send some of their kids to Missoula.
That's a long trip.
I got a grandson going to Missoula this year. The rest of them are Bobcats, but
How in the world did it get past Bozeman? Bozeman's been snapping.
no, this one's been adamant since he was 9 years old. He was going to Missoula.
Is that right?
Yes, and he just got back last week from orientation. So, and my wife's a graduate of of the University of Montana, accounting and teaching. But, you know, the opportunity that a blue-collar guy can provide for his family is, you know, that check on a table on Friday night. I mean, where your wife can take it and pay the bills. And you don't. I grew up in a logging community in Idaho, and that wasn't always the case.
That's right.
It's tough. It's really tough.
It's usually seasonal.
I mean, yeah, you're mudded out, you're dried out, you can't go in when
Equipment breaks down.
equipment breaks down. But being able to not have that stress, you know, and just having a good job, I'm just adamant that if we're gonna keep young people in Montana, I'm not saying these plants are the perfect plants, but I'm saying, given the opportunity, we can continue to work on these plants and make them very clean burning. And with that said, you gotta look at how we base load the Northwest. These plants base load the Northwest. You can have wind and you can have solar, but when the wind ain't blowing and you don't have solar, you still expect your refrigerator to be running and you expect your lights to come on, so you gotta base load that power. So Colstrip, I mean, that's what we do. We base load it throughout the Northwest. We're fortunate and we got a lot of hydro, but that don't always take care of what we need. So that's what got me into politics, jobs and the economy, the immediate economy, you know.
And so how did you decide to run for the legislature?
Well, they couldn't find nobody else. This was a long-held Democratic district, and I think the Republicans were just looking at throwing somebody in there, you know, fresh meat, you know, not expecting. I think so. How I got into it was in 2006. A gentleman, I can't tell you his name right now, he was with the Republican campaign committee, come around and asked me if I'd run, and I discussed it with my wife, and I decided to run, and I never been involved in a campaign, didn't know anything about it, and really the help was kind of scarce. But I had people at work come up and say, hey, let's go. I mean, old-time Democrats telling me they'd help me campaign. And we got out, hit every parade. I mean, I don't know that first or second year, but we hit 3 parades on 4th of July
Good.
with a Model T. So we was having to load it up and haul to the next one, load it up and get to the next one. And we made a lot of parades, had a really good kid, young guy running against me from Huntley. Good guy. And we just kept it a good, clean campaign. And then I had a constitutionalist running against me too. So it was about, it was just, couldn't have been a month, maybe a month, maybe 3 weeks before the election. The Democrat Party sent out a really bad hit piece on me. I mean, this young man in Huntley, he called me up the minute they come out, and he didn't. He didn't know anything about it. His wife called my wife crying, apologizing. He took out a half-page ad in the Yellowstone County News saying this did not come from him and none of it was true. But that could have been what put me over the edge.
That's interesting.
Yeah, I think I always say there's about 270 people vote in Treasure County. I think Treasure County elected me that year.
Is that
So that's about how many I won by. And he is a good guy, young guy. I think it would have been tough on him, but he went on to run for the school board there in Huntley, and he's been a fantastic member of that school board. He's a good guy, you know. That's the kind of campaigns I like.
So you served 2 terms or how many terms did you serve in the
I
House?
served 4 terms in the House. My first term I was on some state government, I think natural resources and local government. And then the second term I got on appropriations. And then I served on appropriations, and in 2013 I chaired appropriations. And I was the only, my committee, it wasn't me, but we was the only appropriations committee that has ever had 100-0 vote on the budget.
Oh, is that right?
And you present your budget in 5 areas, you know. You've got state administration, you got natural resources, you got criminal and justice. You got these 5 sections. Each section was voted 100-0.
Duane,
So-
how'd you do that?
I do not know.
Democrats have a wing that almost never supports Republicans in Montana.
They supported me because I supported them. I told them at the very first of that meeting that if anybody disrespected anybody in that committee, I'd throw them out of the damn committee. And I had the permission of the minority leader and a majority leader to take them off appropriations and throw them out. And we respected each other. They all had input. And that's what I told them at the beginning. Hey, each one of us are representing a certain district. It don't matter if it's a Democrat or a Republican district, you're representing that amount of people. So what this guy says might be something totally different than what you agree with, but still, that's what that segment of people want. So you respect it. I said, granted, we've got the votes in this committee to do whatever we want on the Republican side. But that is not what I want to see. I want to see input, I want to see collaborative thinking, and I want you to agree on what comes out of this committee.
And I've got a follow-up question.
Go ahead.
You want to go ahead? So, we had the opportunity to meet Lou Jones over in Conrad, and he's on YouTube. You will be joining him on YouTube. We didn't know a lot of, I met him through my nephew, who's the newspaper editor there and the Independent Observer. And he's Buck Traxler. He's been there a long time, and I kept reading Lou Jones's columns. He'd write a column when he was in Helena, and I found those interesting. I didn't always agree with him, but he was well reasoned. So I hoped we could beat Lou. We were sort of beginning this project, and David agreed, and so Buck set up that meeting. And David may remember more details than I do. His wife, Carol, I think, was there. And we met in the restaurant. There was a little background noise, but and I hadn't been a Republican for quite a while, but I thought I could join the party if it was like Lou Jones.
I don't think, and I think I carry the same medicine around my neck as Lou in some respects. I'm not near as smart as Lou Jones. God, don't even think so. But I don't think there's any Democrats that hate us. I think, whether we agree or not, we've got a lot of respect amongst us, And there might be, not saying that there ain't people in the legislature that wouldn't like to see me burn, but not amongst parties.
So one of the things that we're pursuing is a more general question of civility. Is Montana still a civil place? I grew up thinking Montana conservatives are where most people were. But the definition of conservative in the 1930s and 40s was probably a little different than it is now. So my concern is what's your feeling?
Well, I think we've lost track of what conservative means. I think I'm a conservative. There's people who tell you I'm a screaming liberal, but I think I'm a conservative.
Yeah.
And the same way with Lou Jones.
Yeah.
You know, there's issues that come up that rather than engage yourself in a discussion and making those hard decisions based on a lot of interviews or listening to testimony or reading information, you just make them because you have an agenda that says you don't like this. And the people that I try to align myself with on both sides of the aisle do not make decisions based on an agenda that someone else has made up for them.
Okay.
And that's worked for me.
So, what are some of the other issues, especially in the Senate, that you've concerned yourself with?
Well, of course, energy. We had the Montana Health Act, 2015.
Is that the Medicaid expansion?
That's the Medicaid expansion. That was a big one.
Did you support that?
Yeah.
Did you get opposition from your constituents?
That's a loaded question. Of course I did.
I mean, from this constituency.
No, because I've got, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4 small newspapers. So when I'm going to make a vote on something like that, either before if I can or certainly afterwards, I have a column in there.
Okay.
And then I immediately after the session, when there's something like that, I have these community meetings, and more often than not, somebody that wants to punch me in the nose for making one of those votes, if I tell them, you know, explain the facts to them, they go, well, hell, why don't we do it that way? Well, that's what we did. Another big issue was dark money. That was my bill, that dark money bill, where we wrote up statutes on how this money, of course, you know, these guys are smart. They've already figured out how to go around a lot of this, but it did curb a lot of it. I was in a primary in my first election into the Senate. I had a primary race, and I mean, they brought the dogs. And I mean, they was, like I said, you know, gut shooting at me from the dark, you know.
Was that the Salt Lake group?
Well, I can't tell you what groups, but there was a lot of groups, you know, out-of-state groups with a lot of money. And I mean, there's certain groups like Americans for Prosperity, they hate me. But they keep coming after me, and every time they do, I think I get another voter. So, you know, that dark money bill, I was pretty proud of that. But there again, if you don't have people, you know, there was a young lady that was a staffer for, I think, leadership at the time, Sandy Welsh. She worked her tail off helping me with that bill. And then an attorney in the governor's office, he helped me a lot with that bill. You know, so we had some really smart people come together, and what I bring to the table is just a little common sense and staying alive for 70 years. You know?
And your bill went through,
Oh yeah,
and the governor signed it.
right.
And that's provided especially for a financial reporting.
Right, right. And what they gotta do, I mean, yeah, and some of these groups could no longer contribute because of the dark money means it all moves around in the dark, so that you don't know where it comes from. This required those groups to identify and have an address that you could get a hold of somebody.
David, do you know if many states passed bills like that?
No, I don't.
Not a lot. I've had calls from several people in legislatures from New England states and all over
Yeah.
asking me about that bill.
My impression is not many, but
Not many.
he's more an expert than
Yeah,
that.
Montana was unusual in that they, after the Anaconda Company had such an impact, Montana passed a law prohibiting corporation money. And then when the Supreme Court decided Citizens United, they said, in essence, corporations could contribute. And so then there was a challenge to the Montana law, and it went to the U.S. Supreme Court, and the U.S. Supreme Court said that the Montana law was unconstitutional because they had ruled in because it was contrary to Citizens United. The Montana was unusual, and I think it was in large part because of the influence of the Anaconda Company in the early years. Is that
And
your
Montana
feeling?
Power,
Yeah.
which was allied with it.
And Montana.
And they run it. I mean,
That's right.
they run it. I mean,
So there was a huge change in this state when Montana Power died out, and you're right in the middle of that.
yeah,
So,
both politically and at work. I worked for Montana Power.
so let's talk a little bit about the transition. And, because in the western part of the state, there's obviously a different view around than there is here. And frankly, I've never had a chance to talk to anybody from here who's directly involved in the transition when Montana Power became a different entity.
Well, actually, the change in entity started with when Paul Schmeckel retired.
Yes, I remember.
It went downhill from there. I mean, it was people in suits that didn't have a damn idea of how you produced a megawatt or pumped a decatherm of gas. I mean, and so then it become more like a .com than a power company. There was nobody any better than Paul Schmeckel. He knew almost everybody that worked for him by name. And after he visited with you, he knew about your family. And the next time he talked to you, he'd ask you about every one of your kids. He knew them. I mean, and he was, Montana Power was a great company at that time to work for. I mean, somebody gets sick, have to go to Salt Lake, here'd come the company airplane, and down to Salt Lake they'd go. I mean, nobody had to ask them. They knew what was going on. But it was really a hard transition, and you know, it's I mean, every scoreboard in this state was bought by Montana Power Company.
Yeah.
You know, George O'Connor,
Yeah.
he was just like Schmeckel. He was a people guy. He understood that it wouldn't be a company if you didn't have that kind of people and loyalty.
The two of the plants are scheduled to be closed in 2022 or something of that
Right.
sort.
2022.
What is the situation on that, and what are you doing about it?
Well, I mean, it was pretty much signed, sealed, and delivered. I mean, it was they sued, went to court, and then the companies agreed. The companies agreed to go ahead and shut them down. Puget Sound Energy and Talon to shut 1 and 2 down. And so, you know, when you have everybody at the table in agreement, then there really isn't anywhere you can go but what they want to do. So those 2 plants will cease operation in 2022. And that will probably be about a third of the workforce. So going on, then there's still a lot of screaming and kicking about 3 and 4, and that's where a lot of my energies is focused, is on keeping those 2 plants running into the 2040s. I think there's a lot of improvements that could go onto them plants. You have to have a certain amount of support for that through these environmental groups, because when you put improvements on a plant, you change the permit. And that's where they can get you, is when you change the permit. You know, even if it's for, actually, one of these plants, they put, that's how this whole thing started, was they put clean burn technology on one of the units. I think it was unit 2, which upped its efficiency and made it burn cleaner. But what it did was it exceeded the plate on the boiler's specifications. So that put it out of the permit. They wanted, the environmentalist said, you either re-permit this or we're gonna take you to court. Well, you couldn't get a plant re-permitted in this day and age with the environmental community, so they just agreed to shut it down. But it was the improvement of those units that was their downfall. And the way they found out about it was a Boilermaker was on being interviewed. I mean, this all sounds like it's out of a storybook. He was being interviewed, and he's proud of the knowledge he's got. He's proud of his craft and what they're doing. And he makes a statement, we made this plant perform better than it did when it was brand new. And which was true. But it took it out of that nameplate capacity on that, and that's what the permit goes off, is what you got on that nameplate on your boiler. And that was their undoing right there.
What would have been the cost, or was there an option
No.
to add additional anti-pollution equipment to continue the 2 plants?
Well, the 2 plants were probably in the top 20% in the nation. I mean, it wasn't the pollution that was at issue here. It was I mean, they've been wanting to get rid of these plants for 25 years, the environmentalists. And that was an opportunity. The door opened and they walked through and took it. And now they're working on 3 and 4. But I think that, you know, even if Puget got rid of, say for instance, Puget, we're getting most of the pressure out of Washington and Oregon. And even if Puget divested themselves of these plants, they would still have to buy power from whoever bought them. They don't have enough power out there to run Washington or Oregon.
Well, where are they getting power that they can afford to close 1 and 2?
They ain't getting it. It ain't out there. That's what I'm saying. It's not out there. They've talked about building some big gas-fired power plants, but they can't get pipelines. And the pipelines that's in the ground don't have the capacity. But it just sounds good to shut down 3 and 4, get rid of this dirty coal, but there's nothing to replace it. That's what I say, base load power. There is no base load power in the Northwest.
Is the cost of a gas plant more expensive than a coal plant?
These guys are rate-based. They're public utilities. So it don't matter what they cost. You, the consumer, is gonna pay for that new plant.
Okay.
So they don't care about cost. And they get to collect 9% above their costs for their shareholders. So it don't matter what it costs, but they can't get the same people that want them to shut down units 3 and 4 won't let them build pipelines in Washington. And they want a pipeline out of British Columbia to bring the Canadian gas into Washington.
Right. That's been an issue. But it's funny, I haven't heard anybody talking about a pipeline coming out of back on through Montana. Is that on the table?
No. For gas?
Yeah.
No. Well, they're talking about, that Keystone XL, that oil pipeline going south. but
Right. That's
As far as, and that's the same way here to capture the carbon. That's their issue right now is the CO2 coming out of these plants.
Right.
Well, there's a wonderful thing about CO2. You can use it in enhanced oil recovery. You can pipeline it into these, like you take the Cedar Creek anticline. It's an old oil field sitting over there by Baker. Has as much oil in it, if not more, than the Bakken. Recoverable oil. We could take the CO2 out of these stacks, pipeline it 90 miles, and we'd have all that revenue out of the Cedar Creek anticline. You know where they're getting their CO2? Pinedale, Wyoming. They're piping that all the way from southwest Wyoming into the old Bell Creek field and the Cedar Creek anticline.
And that's
When
what-
we got it sitting right here.
So why isn't they doing it?
Well, we're working on it. We're working
I
on
mean,
it.
is there opposition from the environmental?
Well, there will be on the pipeline, but I think that the way that the pipeline and the companies deal with landowners now are so much improved on the way they used to. I think a pipeline, as far as the landowners, is feasible. I think it's a doable project. You will have environmentalists opposing this, but what it'll be doing is getting rid of the CO2 that they're also opposing.
And it
so,
only goes 90 miles? Is that what you're saying?
90 miles to the Cedar Creek.
That's a
anticline.
mighty short pipeline.
But it's about 1.5 million a mile.
That's peanuts compared to the
See,
billions.
and not only are you talking about using it for enhanced oil recovery, then it becomes a saleable commodity. On a worldwide scale, CO2 is in shortage. I mean, that's what we make our drinks out of, our carbonated drinks and everything. On a worldwide scale, I mean, they can export CO2.
But they can somehow corral it out of the smokestack?
Yeah, it's about probably about a $600 million project, and I've been working with the Department of Energy, trying to get some kind of agreement with them for the federal government to help fund part of that. And then the other thing you have is a parasitic load on your power plant, where it takes so much power to run an ancillary process. And to start with, this was like almost 60% load on your plant to process it. Now they're getting it down to where it's about 35%. So the process of taking it from the stack has come down, and the cost of the equipment is starting to come down. I think within the next 5 years, we'll have something here that will be extracting CO2 from the stacks.
Is the governor in a position to talk to you about this?
Well, he
Or
is,
his office?
and he is, I believe he's on the, and I may be mistaken, but I'm pretty sure he's on the Western Governor's carbon sequestration
Yeah.
committee, and he's been at the meetings I've been at. He's been there. He supports that sequestration.
That's interesting.
You know,
Are there any successful carbon sequestration projects that are working now?
I think there's, what's it, I think there's one down in Texas that's working, they've been working with CO2 for probably since the 50s down there. And I'm trying to remember the name of the company that just did it. So yeah, there is some successful endeavors there.
The co-op of 5 different co-ops in the Yellowstone Valley and up to Lewistown, they plan to have a carbon sequestration plant in Great Falls, and I think they concluded that they didn't have the resources or something of that sort. It never went through, but they.
Well, number one, that damn plant should have been built in Isham. You know, and number two, I'm paying for it through 2 different co-ops, Beartooth and Tongue River Electric. So that's not a good word in my book.
Well,
that was, I mean, I don't know what exactly went wrong there, but it did exactly go wrong there. So it wasn't a very successful endeavor. It don't look to me like they had their ducks in a row there.
I'm a subscriber to Beartooth.
Yeah, I know. And that's probably one of the most expensive co-ops in the state.
Oh, it is.
I've got a place up out of Columbus, up on Shane Ridge. And then where I live here, I'm on Tongue River, and they was both involved in that. So, yeah, I'm paying for that.
I'm looking to the future here, the immediate future, and then a longer one. As I understand, the new legislature coming up has some significant issues, both about education. University of Montana's in deep trouble. My dad was comptroller, and he was there doing the business side for many years. And I don't think they've ever been in a crisis area now. And the Medicaid issue. There's been cutbacks, and I'm really curious as to what you anticipate in the upcoming session. The university's talking about going out of business and creating one overall university, as was once the original idea in the 1890s.
Well, you know, I think the universities, I think the folks that paid to administer those universities need to make some hard decisions. I mean, it's fun to be in those positions when everything's good. It's no fun when everything is not good, and it's not good right now. So I think they're gonna need to make some tough decisions at the university administration level, the Board of Regents, and at the legislature. You know, we don't, and I'm sure that you both know this, that we don't say, okay, University of Montana, you can have X amount of money. Montana State, you can have X amount. We just give them money. Board of Regents decides who gets that money.
Right.
Other than, and I might be mistaken here, but the Extension Service, we do appropriate money to the Extension Service,
Yeah.
which is attached to.
And that's important, but it's a small part of the pie.
It's a very small part of the pie, but that's the only money that we necessarily,
Directly.
through the long-range building program, we appropriate money for projects at different universities, and we pick the projects. But other than that, the operating money, and that all goes through the Board of Regents. So I think there's gonna be a lot of hard conversations of how we go forward.
Are you still on Appropriations Committee?
I'm on Finance and Claims in the
Finance?
Senate. Yeah,
Okay, so this will come in before you.
yeah.
So related to that, in my mind, are health services and the Medicaid situation. Is that being significantly cut back in the coming session?
Well, I don't see it, a lot of what was cut back was I think a lot of what was cut back was political and not necessary. But going forward, I think that a lot of those services will be restored in this session. But now with I-184 on the ballot, which pretty much, I mean, it maintains Medicaid expansion along with it dedicates the tobacco money to pay for it. And so I think there's some opposition to some of the moving pieces that have to do with how you're gonna fund that. I don't think there's anybody out there that thinks they're gonna do away with Medicaid expansion. If they are,
They're not talking to you, okay?
I mean, it just not, when do you take away a benefit? Yeah, something as large as Medicaid expansion,
Yeah.
it's not gonna happen.
You have quite a few constituents who are beneficiaries of Medicaid?
Yeah, really, it surprises me. And it really, well, yeah, because, see, I got Rosebud, part of Custer, all of Treasure, all of Muscle Shell, and the largest geographical area
Wow.
of Yellowstone County, which means all the rural. You start traveling this area, there's a lot of Medicaid.
Right. That would have been my assumption, but I've never.
Yeah, and you'd never think of it, you take like Muscle Shell. There's a lot of people up there that's below poverty level. I mean, and you know, without, and I don't have the reservation in Rosebud County, that's another district. But just even in Rosebud County, I mean, where we look like we're pretty affluent, we got all this stuff going on, there's a lot of people that live below the poverty level.
They are mostly seniors over 50?
Not necessarily, not necessarily. You know, there's a lot of younger
Okay.
folks that's,
A lot of mothers with babies, I
a
expect.
lot of mothers with babies.
Yeah.
I don't care where you go. Well, I'm not gonna say that on camera, but, yeah, and there's a lot of people that, you know, really need it. I think there's two ways looking at this. You know, the one side, like Ed Buttrey's HELP Act, which was Medicaid expansion, had work requirements, you know, that if you was able-bodied, you had to get out there and look for work. And I don't think this I-184 has that, but that's something that that's one reason they're trying to call for the special session and the referendum to get some of that stuff in there.
You know, Obamacare, obviously the National Republicans are trying to get rid of it, but parts of that, as I understand it, got kind of segued into Medicaid. Is that true?
That's true, and that you had to design your program that had this benefits of Obamacare in order to get the plan approved by the federal government. I mean, I think assets, and I could be wrong here, but I think assets was one of the things that Obamacare didn't look at your assets.
Yeah.
Montana Medicaid wants to look at your assets.
Okay.
They want drug testing, they want able-bodied work requirements in here. So, you know, that'll be a bone of contention, but if I-184 passes, it'll pass the way it is. And it'll be funded with that tobacco money. So,
That's an
you know, on
interesting,
one hand, we spend millions a year trying to get people off tobacco,
Yeah.
but yet we're collecting a lot of taxes from it. So,
Well, you know, along on the West Coast, the same thing's happening to marijuana. huge amount of money coming in taxes.
You know, one thing that always really struck me was, I think it was 1921. The Anaconda Company paid $35,000 in state taxes. The farmers in eastern Montana paid $2.5 million. I mean, that's the way it was,
Yeah.
you know? But, of course, I'm an eastern Montana guy. I always say we feed the rest of you over there in western Montana, but, no, I think, you asked me about civility. I think overall, certainly from 2013 in the Senate, I wasn't there, I was still in the House, but civility completely got tossed out the window. I mean, it was mayhem. And, but I see it, I haven't seen any personal attacks or anything in the Senate like they have had in the past. I've seen people, you know, very cordial to one another. And the House, you know, it's supposed to be a little more,
Yeah.
you know, and that's why I always liked the House. I loved the House because it was like,
You're like a little man.
you like a little mayhem, you know, kind of like those third world countries where you jump over the guy's desk and start pounding on him, but it never got that bad. But I mean, I think it is more civil. I think we've got some legislators that are engaging a little more. And if you don't engage, why you're up there, I don't know. Because it's a terrible place to waste time.
So I got two specific questions. One relates to the coal tax endowment. That's not the right word, the trust fund.
Yeah.
Is that something you're proud of?
Well, I think so. You bet. When you can put $1 billion into a fund
Yeah,
on the back of your brother's miners,
coming right out of
you
here.
bet. I'm pretty proud of that. And then you gotta figure for that $1 billion, there was another $1 billion, because only half of it goes in there.
Right,
There was another $1 billion that every county, every city in this state have used for schools, bridges, roads, sewers, water
Right.
plants. Every county, every city has at one time or another got TSEP money, Treasury State Endowment Program. That's, I've always said that should be Treasure State Coal Endowment, but they makes them feel plainer if they don't say coal. But that's where the money
Right.
comes from.
right.
And I'm real proud of that.
Okay.
I mean, I've never begrudged anybody any of that money but what I ask them is understand where it comes from. When this goes away, there is no more of that money.
Unless that endowment can be kept alive.
Yeah, I mean,
Don't
and
get into
the
it.
interest off it, yeah, we use the interest and then we use the other 50%, but, you know, things are getting, you take the public retirement, public employee retirement or the teacher's retirement that we're funding off that interest, that just grows. I mean, and it's, thank God it's there so that can stay actually sound, but.
Well, as an insider outsider, I'm very proud of it. I think
Yeah.
we're a really rare state to have had the wisdom to do that. The other question is unrelated, but it's on my mind. You're a Republican, proud Republican. Trump's flying into Great Falls. Are you gonna go over there?
You know what? I'd go, except I've got a family trip planned to the Bighorns. And I've got a son that's a career Marine and he happens to be home. And
He's on duty. I mean, he's an active Marine.
Yeah, he's active duty. He's a Marine and he's a Marine Corps major.
Has he been in Afghanistan? Or?
He's been in the combat zone 7 times.
Okay.
He's been in Afghanistan, been in
So
Iraq,
there's a lot of different places.
and he's been on these, he was in a fleet anti-terrorism security team that did extractions, whatever that means. I mean, it sounds like a dentist to me.
It does.
I
think more
so.
painful than it
So he's traveled with Jordanian Special Forces. He's had a career. He just finished up. He was commanding officer of the Salt Lake City recruiting station, which covers Nevada, Utah, and southern Idaho. So we went down last week to the change of command, and he's on his way to Virginia.
He'll go back in the field?
No, he'll go back for school for a year, and then he'll go somewhere.
So he'll go to Quantico?
Yeah, he'll go to Quantico.
He was a Marine.
Right.
Really?
I took my officer training at Quantico.
Yeah, that's where he took his.
Yeah.
And he'll probably, it's pretty good cinch that when he gets done with the school, he'll pin on his lieutenant colonel.
Good, and he'll get a
And
raise.
get a battalion maybe.
Mhm.
But,
I'm sure he appreciates that you will go in the Big Horn Mountains with him and not go.
oh yeah, well, the whole thing, all of them. His brother lives at Columbus, organized it, and he's been like a fanatic about this thing, and if you opted not to go, it wouldn't be good. So, but I'm looking forward to it.
So what do you think will be the impact, if any, of Trump in Montana?
Oh, I think it's just good. I mean, I don't care if it's who the president is. If they land in Montana, I think that's a big deal. I really do. You know, he's the commander-in-chief. He's the head guy, and if he comes to your state, you might not like him, but he came to your state. You know, and I think there'll be a pretty good turnout for him up there, and you know.
Did you take sides in the Republican primary here in June? Between Rosendale and Fagg and Downing?
Well, you're taping all this.
Okay.
Yeah, I was a big Russ Fagg supporter.
Well, I was thinking you were listed as one.
Yes, I was.
On his website.
I supported Russ Fagg, and you know, he lost that, but
Why did he lose? He seemed
God,
like
he come out of nowhere. He come out of nowhere.
I mean, his dad was there.
Yeah, but
The Fagg
people,
name is-
you know, one thing I think he should have got his wife out there in front a little more. I mean, she's born, she's anaconda to the bone, you know. Barclays in Anaconda, that's her family, you know, and she's a great person to get out and talk to people, and he's good, but he's kind of like,
A judge.
he's like a damn judge. But he would have been a good one.
We interviewed him, you know.
Did you?
He's part of this project.
Oh, is he?
Yeah.
Oh, I liked him, man. I really liked him, and
And we interviewed his father, the senator.
did you?
Yeah.
Well, Russ was in the house.
Right. Well, and his father was in the house, but his father was in high school when I was.
Really?
Yeah.
What year did you graduate?
He graduated in 48, didn't
I
he?
graduated in 50. I think he graduated a year earlier.
He and I were at Boy State together.
Okay,
And we
so
were
2
in
years.
interscholastic together. We ran the high hurdles together. And I think I beat him. He's one of the few people I beat.
Well, yeah, I was a dyed-in-the-wool Russ Fagg supporter. That kept me up. You know, he was ahead, and he was still only down by 300 votes. And then they counted, and what the hell, that Beaverhead County, why they went the way they did. Beaverhead and Custer was the last two counted. And Custer went big time, Rosendale.
They did.
Oh, yeah.
Why is that?
Well, Rosendale, you know, he's got a lot of supporters. He's Glendive.
Oh, he was in Glendive, right.
Yeah.
And he represented Glendive in the
House and
Senate.
the Senate, yeah.
And he was a majority leader in the Senate?
Yeah, he might have been,
Did you serve with him in the Senate?
probably, yeah. That's where we cut this conversation.